John, our streak of great guests continues this week. We have the Cubs president of baseball operations, Jed Hoyer.
Gold star to you for that. That's a great get. And he doesn't do a ton of national interviews, but very, very well spoken and insightful. Really looking forward to talking to Jed Hoyer about a team that is beloved, not only on the north side of Chicago, but throughout Chicagoland and for many people around the country.
Yeah, we'll talk about the dynasty that never was. We'll ask him questions about what is a big offseason for him with lots of additions. For the first time on the show, we'll dive into a mailbag and we'll do hit and error at the end. And maybe you'll be surprised if I give you a hit or an error, John, at the end. We'll see. We'll have to see if you're going to have to stick with it on the whole show if you join us on the show with Joel Sherman and John Heyman. John, this is an evergreen podcast, but I do want to say that on the day we're recording it, it's January 31st, which means tomorrow, if we're playing the game correctly, is February 1st. And of course, something in I think our baseball writer biological clock says that once the month switches to February, we're in spring training mode. Do you like spring training, John?
I do. I love spring training. And, we spend most of our time in Florida, but it's great to get out to Arizona. I haven't been out for a few years. I was scheduled March 12th? At night, and COVID hit, and I canceled my flight. And then the next morning, MLB delayed playing anymore. So that's my most recent memory. But Arizona is very convenient and nice if anybody's planning to go. Easy to get around, but Florida is the one we spent the most time in. And Tampa's nice. It's improved, and the Port St. Lucie is improved. I would say, some of the Florida cities aren't my favorite. I won't name any.
When you say improved, if you go from 0 to 1, it's not a gigantic improvement, right? Like, is there a better Chili's there or something now? What's the?
I like Tampa. It's not bad. You're only there for a week, right? You can do it.
Yeah.
I know it's not New York.
I flew home on March 6th, 2020, and a couple of days later, we weren't covering anything. I was in Arizona and I flew home. That was the last assignment I had before COVID struck. John, we're in a period right now, not tons of news in our little world. Jeff McNeil signed a 4-year extension for $50 million. The Rays signed a bunch of people to extensions. The Marlins and the Red Sox made a reliever for reliever trade, Blyer and Barnes. This morning, Dexter Fowler, longtime terrific outfielder, retired. Not a lot. So we figured let's play mailbag for the first time on the show. So John, I'm going to read some questions here. We'll bat it back and forth. Thanks to the listeners for doing this. This is from X-Patton PGH. I'm assuming that's Pittsburgh, though he has a Padres question. The Padres question was, San Diego's payroll is instructive. It shows teams not in mega markets can and will spend. Is there anything MLB can do to get perennial rebuilders like Pittsburgh, Kansas City, etc., to increase payroll and improve their products?
Well, I don't think that's
right from the beginning.
Well, I don't think that's. I think it is a Pittsburgh question. I think you're right. I think he's a Pittsburgh Pirate fan who's been upset. I actually think I gave them a hit right in our hit or error game a couple of weeks ago for the McCutchen signing. They've done a few things this winter, and that's good because obviously I understand why their fan base has been upset over the last several years. First of all, I'll point out that the San Diego is not a small market. San Diego is the 12th market in the United States, so you could say it's a mid-market. They have an extraordinary owner, Peter Seidler, who has gone to extraordinary extremes, I would say, in spending. And people who are around the game do not see how he's going to not lose a lot of money. So give him credit that he's willing to lose a lot of money and win. So you can't take one example and say, why can't all the teams do that? Give the guy credit. He wants to win. The other teams are not going to be like that. The Pirates don't have that kind of revenue. I'm with him. I don't think MLB is going to force them to spend more money, but I would like to see Pittsburgh and many of the other small market teams spend more. I am not against the floor. I think MLB proposed a floor, but with too low a ceiling. I think we just need a floor. I'm not sure you have to have a ceiling, but I wouldn't be surprised if they introduce one next time, especially the way Steve Cohen has been willing to spend. But I think the solution is not to implore each individual team, is to set some kind of a floor. I don't know what you think about that. I know the union doesn't like it, but I want to see these small market teams spend more, because right now you got teams. Obviously, you're one team at 380 million, but you have other teams in the 300 range, and then you've got teams that are spending 1/3 of that or less.
Yeah, I think without extraordinary owners, you're not going to have extraordinary spending. We're seeing it even in New York. Steve Cohen's appearance with his wealth changes the game. I think that maybe the future of all sports leagues is it's not even for the very wealthy. I think it's for the super wealthy to get in it. Unless, guys, I made this point a few weeks ago, look at this as like their yacht, right? Like if you own the yacht, you don't look at it as something that throws money back on you. You do it for status, joy, power, etc. And if it costs you $100 million or $200 million to maintain your yacht, it's for those things. And I think that would be the only way we're going to get that, throughout all sports, not just in the sport though that doesn't have a cap in some way. We're going to need super rich. John, this person headlines this Yankee question. It's no surprise. It's at Billy George 8. We got Martin Steinbrenner and 8, I assume, is for Yogi. What's the purpose of keeping both Peraza and Volpe if only one can play shortstop on the Yankees roster? Wouldn't it make more sense to trade one for a missing piece at another position?
Well, I mean, certainly other teams have asked about them, and that's always an option. I don't think that's a terrible idea if you can decide which one you want to keep. My feeling is Peraza's got a good chance to be their starting shortstop, and they probably look at Volpe as their best prospect overall. So it's probably not easy. So I get it with the Yankees, but it's a reasonable thought. The Yankees have traded a lot of prospects, but obviously they love Volpe, they love Peraza. Dominguez, who's their third prospect, they have offered him to the Reds in that, which would have been a nice deal for them to make, obviously, because Montas did not work out, and the Reds pitcher Luis Castillo would have been quite a big plus for the Yankees to do. But for whatever reason, their top two prospects are shortstops. I can see what the writer is saying, but then again, it's difficult to give up these guys who they think are going to be huge stars.
Yeah, look, our next guest, John, when we're on this show is Jed Hoyer, who runs the Cubs. They signed Dansby Swanson. They're moving their shortstop, Nico Horner, to second base. The Astros won another championship last year. Alex Bregman was a shortstop. They put him at third base. Shortstops can move around in a time where we're going to get limited shifts. You better have a rangy second baseman, not just a guy who plays short right field. But the biggest problem for the Yankees should be trying to figure out where both of these guys play, if they could, by the way, play at a high level. And I don't think the Yankees could overtake the Astros unless they start playing a different way on offense. And maybe these two guys are the beginning of them playing a different way on offense.
Right, and they may end up trading kind of Falefa and Gleyber Torres, right? I mean, it looks like they have a glut at the moment, but it does feel like those two are on the block, along with some other guys, and just have not been able to find the right trade.
Yeah, John, let's give the other side of town some equal time here. This is from at Mill Manor. Is there a Pete Alonso extension before opening day?
I mean, with Steve Cohen, you can't count it out, but it's hard to wrap your head around the idea that he's already $110 million on the tax. You sign Pete Alonso, and you're going to end up being at $125 million or something like that on tax. So not going to be an easy one. Not that McNeil was. I mean, everybody praised that McNeil deal, how great it is. But, it's a 4-year deal, $50 million, $12.5 million AAV. He was going to make 6.25 or so, maybe up to 7 in arbitration. He's added more tax for himself, and then he obviously is willing to spend, wants to keep these great players around, is going to make an effort. I personally think it's going to be difficult. So I would guess not, but I don't know. Maybe you have a better take on this.
Yeah, I think it's a very difficult one, John. I think there's a lot of mirror to Judge in that he started later, a college guy. So his first full season is until 24. Judge was 25. So he becomes a free agent a little older. As opposed to Judge, though, he's not a great athlete. One of the reasons I think the Mets invested in McNeil is they think bat to ball skills age well. Lack of athleticism tends to not age well. Having said that, after Judge, Alonso is the foremost power hitter in the sport over the last 5 years, and generally power gets paid for in the industry. So I think it's that middle one about how does this age, but he has the one skill that we're usually willing to pay a ton of money for. I think it's a delicate balance there.
Yeah, he is very popular with the fans, and
there's that like Judge, right?
And also, he is their big power source, right? So it's going to be difficult to ultimately let him go, but they still have a little time on that. With Steve Cohen there, it's hard to see him leaving. But then again, at this moment, not an easy one to get done.
Yeah, tough one. John, let's go broader again here. This is from AGO_8834 with an AL West question. The Astros are clear favorites to win the AL West. So do you guys think that the race for second place could be a close one between the Mariners, Angels, and Rangers? No A's there. We're the A's. No.
The A's are not in the race. We always praise the Angels. One of our first shows, and we love the Angels. And boy, we keep bringing that up. Again, I love what the Angels did, but I mean, frankly, the Rangers did more. And with everything that they did, I'm not going to be shocked if Texas finishes second. I know I'm always seen as the Mariners detractor, and they're really good too. They're probably going to be picked for second, but I'm gonna surprise and go with Texas here.
I think the Mariners also have a little more farm depth than Texas and the Angels. And so therefore, if it's kind of bunched in July, I think they're the ones that could probably be most aggressive for whatever best on the marketplace. I do think that all three of those teams are trying. John, it goes back to the question at the beginning with the Padres, why the Pittsburgh. It's great to see like a bunch of teams where suddenly we're thinking, hey, the Astros, they're the class, but there are three teams that could push them at least a little bit this year. They don't have to win the division by 20 games each time. So, maybe we could get something else. Let's go back to New York for one. This is from a Yankee question from the guy's got your name, John Hoey, Hoey. I don't even want to guess what it might be. Are the Yankees punting upgrades at third base and left field until midseason? Hicks and Donaldson, Aaron Hicks and Josh Donaldson can't be the plan to try to topple Houston.
Well, it does appear that they're likely to get those jobs. Hicks is in a competition. Donaldson is the guy at third base, but I think they expect or hope that it is Hicks. They are paying a lot of money for Hicks. He's still got years to go. So do you have a different feeling of? I mean, they're saying it's a competition, and I like what Cabrera did, but I don't see them upgrading, and there really aren't many opportunities out there to upgrade big at this moment. So unless you go out and get Ryan Reynolds, and from what I understand, the asking price is way too high for them and for others, so that's not going to happen. With what they have now, it's going to be Donaldson, and I would say it's likely they're going to start with Hicks. I don't know. They're saying it's a competition in left. You feel differently than I do, though. I think they're going to go with Hicks if they can.
Yeah, I wrote about this last week in the Post, John. I called Brian Cashman, and among the many things I asked him, I said, because he said Donaldson is the third baseman and Hicks is the favorite. He differentiated.
He did say favorite, okay.
Yeah, for left field. And I said, well, what if everyone were making $720,000, which is the minimum salary? Would it still be those two guys? Or is this about, like, you want some bang for your buck here? The Yankees made a very aggressive 7-year, $70 million deal with Hicks and have gotten almost nothing in return since they did that. They made a trade that doesn't look great today, right? For Donaldson, Isaiah Falefa, and Ben Rodford, a catcher who never played for them last year.
No, it looks terrible.
Right, it looks terrible. So you're trying to derive stuff out of this, and he insisted not. I would say this is a Hal Steinbrenner question to me, John. At some point, they're probably going to have to chow down on these. The question is, should they be chowing down on them now? They got plenty of infield guys to play instead of Donaldson. To your point, they could go find another outfielder, etc. So I think those guys should and probably are on the clock. And the question is, how long is that clock? Do they look terrible in spring and they said, well, we got to do something else? April, May, it feels like neither guy makes, to me, it feels like neither guy makes it to the finish line.
Yeah,
and so
I'm in favor of playing the best player, but it's not so clear that somebody else is better. And I get it. I mean, they're not going to say it's about the contract, but I think it's bad business you have a guy making, what does Donaldson make? Almost $25 million a year, right?
Yeah.
You gotta play him. If he does well, he might have a value of somewhat, not 25 million, but something. At this point, he has no value. So I mean, even though I'm in favor of playing the best or whatever, I get it, and I understand why Hicks is the favorite. He has done it in the past. You look at the track record. There are reasons to say, you know what, if he can get close to what he's done in the past, he's going to be okay. So I'm not killing him for this if they go with Hicks and Donaldson.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that they should start with him and see what it looks like. That's why I put it on Hal Steinbrenner. Like, what is his tolerance for if it doesn't look good? John, why don't I close our first ever mailbag with a really, really hard hitting question? It's from Offseason Dude. And so you're going to have to put a lot of thought into this. Which one of you would look better in a beard? I mean, it's an easy answer, John, but whatever you need to do to make your life feel better.
Well, a beard would cover up more of the face, so I'm going to go with me. I think the beard would help me. I actually had a beard in college, and my mother was not too happy with that. That I can say. So I'm going to say the beard would be a better idea for me.
Yeah, well, I got about 3 days going here. If you could see this, if you're following us on the
That's 3 days.
Yes,
that's about an hour for me. By the way,
that's an hour for you. Okay, well,
not to brag, but
you're more swarthy or manly or both.
I'm going to go shave for the third time when we're done here.
At MLB Network, I've never gotten a piece of advice like talk faster, talk slower, more of this, more of that. I've gotten one piece of advice in about 10 years: shave. That's
well, you came in with a stubble a couple times, so I get that.
I came in with a stumble also a few times there, but that's for a different
you're talking
podcast.
about your college years now.
Yeah.
No.
If you stick with this podcast, the show with Joel Sherman and John Heyman, next up is the president of baseball operations for the Chicago Cubs, Jed Hoyer. Back on the show with Joel Sherman and John Heyman, and we're so happy to be joined by the president of baseball operations of the Chicago Cubs, Jed Hoyer, three-time champion as either an assistant GM of either the Red Sox or the Cubs. I believe 12 seasons complete now with the Cubs and going into the 2023 season here. So, Jed, thank you so much for joining us here.
Oh, thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Jed, I want to start off in this place. John and I were there, obviously, 2016, the team wins a championship for the first time since 1908. Obviously, it was one of the big stories in the history of baseball, you guys doing that. I think on the night you guys win, we think that's the beginning of a dynasty. And it probably says a lot to how hard that actually is to do. But now you're in the middle of a rebuild because that didn't last as long as you probably thought. Why didn't it last as long? And what is the lesson maybe you learn from that as you try to put something else back together?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and honestly, it's a question that I've probably spent, thousands and thousands of hours thinking about. I think when we won, I remember, I think it was that year, or maybe the next year, Fangraphs had a thing of like the most talent under control at that point. We were like double any other team at that point. I mean, we had so much young talent on the books, and we just won a World Series. And I think you just felt like, okay, we're going to be back here every year. And to me, it's like one of the best lessons of my career. And there's a couple lessons. Number one, it's really hard to win. We went to the LCS in 15, 16, and 17. 2018, we had a team that we finished tied for the best record in the National League. But we got caught by the Brewers at the end of the year. And we lost 2 one-game playoffs. And, that 4-year run was a really good run, but only one time were we able to, get to the World Series and win it. I think, a lot of factors contributed to us sort of not being able to sustain that. I think we could do 3 podcasts on all of those. I think that some of those were unique to having won in Chicago for the first time in 108 years. I think some of those were, mistakes that we probably made, things we could have done better or different. I think that, I think anyone that's good in this job is probably a lot more self-critical than the fans or media, and so there's no question I've sat and thought about the things we could have done differently, the things that we made mistakes with along the way. And there are many, all that said, I'm pretty proud of what we did accomplish. And I think we had a run, we had a really good run. We just weren't able to sustain it past the length of control we had of those players. We weren't able to get extensions of those players. We weren't able to continue winning. And, that and COVID, we ended up in a situation where we had to reset. And my hope is that we can get back to that place again, but I can learn some of the lessons we learned last time to build it and make it a little bit more sustainable this time.
Joel and I are going to continue our good guy, bad guy routine that we started last week with Chaim Bloom. And I'm going to ask you about the winter that you had, because I thought it was fantastic. I mean, you were one of the clear winners. It looks from the outside like you accomplished every objective you probably wanted to do. You got a star for shortstop, and you have a very good shortstop who's going to move over to second, and Nico Horner. So adding Dansby Swanson, and you added Bellinger, who obviously has a high upside, Mancini, Hosmer on a minimum deal. How do you evaluate the winter? From the outside, it looks fantastic. I know you go in with a plan. Did you accomplish everything you wanted to accomplish?
Yeah, so I think as far as what we thought we could accomplish going into the winter with kind of the amount of money we had, with the holes we had to fill, I thought we did a really good job as a staff of getting that done. I've done this job long enough and been around long enough to know that, ultimately all that really matters is what happens when we get on the field, how those players perform. We've all seen, unheralded winters turn out great. By far the best offseason I've ever been a part of was the 03, going into 03 in Boston. And we signed Bill Miller, we signed Ortiz, we signed Mike Timlin, Ramiro Mendoza, Kevin Millar. And that ended up being this incredible offseason that no one talked about. And I've been part of off seasons that were really well heralded that ended up being really poor, and so I think that all that matters is how the team performs together. But our goal was to kind of fill the big blocks that we had. We felt like improving our infield was something that was really important. We felt like filling center field was something that was really important. 2 rotation spots, and then adding some power on offense. Those are sort of the main things we needed to accomplish. One thing I will say is that I think the better your farm system is, and the more your farm system is churning out players, a lot of times the simpler your offseason can become, right? I look at the Cardinals, for example. They needed to fill their catcher hold. They did that. But right now, they've got a lot of really good young talent. These guys are up in the big leagues. They're performing. And so that's a pretty simple offseason, but they didn't have to have a complex offseason. There's other teams like that as well, where they needed to fill 1 or 2 holes, but the rest of their holes were generally filled. Unfortunately for us, we had a lot of holes we needed to fill to compete. I thought we did as good a job of that as we could have given our plan, but I hope going forward that we can have many fewer holes. I think that our farm system is much improved. I think over the next few years, we'll start to churn out a lot of players. And then when that happens, you gain that efficiency financially, you gain those young players, and you don't have to go out and add 2 starters and a shortstop and a center fielder and a DH bat. And that's really challenging in an off season. You can't do that every year.
Yeah, there was a lot there that I'd love to follow up on. You mentioned the Cardinals signed the catcher. That's your catcher, Wilson Contreras, a few things. But John has typecast me, so I guess I've got to stick with the bad cop again here.
You do it naturally, Joel.
Thank you.
When your DNA is your DNA, you lead the league in RBI and DNA. So it's such as life. These last few years, your payroll was down, and there certainly was a lot of arrows thrown your way, Tom Ricketts' way, the owner of the team, when you brought your payroll way down these past couple of years. It's back up this year. You'll be up over $210 million as a payroll, especially for luxury tax purposes. What's it like to be at the center of the storm, though, when you're being criticized for taking the team the other way, even if in your heart of hearts you know the last dynasty, the previous group is done, and I have to do something else?
Yeah. When I took the
You like
when I
that,
took the
John?
job,
Did you like the bad cop there thing?
Yeah, that's good.
when I took the job, I knew there was going to be some really challenging decisions. Theo, left a year early, in part because he felt like, these should be my decisions, moving forward. And so I knew there'd be some hard decisions. We did have to take the payroll down after COVID. And I think, when we did that, we knew we were sort of transitioning this group. So, we traded Darvish for young talent. And then in some ways, I knew that was potentially going to set up us needing to make some trades mid-season if we weren't competing. And I mean, of course, those are like brutally hard decisions to have to make. These are guys that won the World Series here. They're iconic Cubs players, but ultimately, I think you have to have the conviction to make hard decisions in these jobs. And, I believe very much in what we accomplished as a staff and in kind of resetting our farm system, getting young talent for those players. And we've reinvested the money, in our roster. So, I think we're on the front. Like, we're not there yet. We're not churning out those players every year. We're not at that place where that I just described, where we don't have a lot of holes every year. But I feel like we're on the front edge where I think is going to be a really good run of success. And like I said, hopefully we can learn from some of the mistakes last time. But I think, making hard decisions is the job, right? And if you're not willing to make some hard decisions, then I think it's going to be challenging for you, especially in a big market. And we did make some hard decisions. And I think, over time, I think that I don't expect people to understand. I don't expect people to not put on the jersey of their old favorite player and not be disappointed. I understand that. That's part of being a fan. But I am confident that those decisions will lead us to a very good place in the future.
Well, two of your biggest signings, obviously Swanson was the biggest signing, and Bellinger is a big one as well. Wanted to get your take on that. They've kind of gone in opposite directions. Bellinger was an MVP, struggled the last couple years. Swanson, he got less than the other big star shortstops because he doesn't have the track record, but he looked as good as any of them. I think he probably had the best year of all of the four great shortstops last year, at least arguably so. What are your expectations for Bellinger? Can he get back to the MVP level or at least all-star level? And also for Swanson, was he that player that we saw last year, which was, frankly, equal to Bogaerts and Correa and Turner?
Yeah, no, good questions. And I think with Bellinger, I think, starting with the expectations, I mean, one guy wins an MVP or two guys win the MVP every year, right? So expecting him to have 1,000 OPS and play Gold Glove center field, I think is probably that's hard for anybody. But the hope is certainly he gets back to being a all-star caliber player, gets back to being a unbelievable talent at age 27 that he is, and he's working unbelievably hard. One of the things that made me really happy in the process was that it was very clear from the minute we expressed interest after he was non-tendered that he wanted a 1-year deal. In a place where he felt like he could reestablish his value. And I think, that was important to me, right? And not looking at a multi-year deal. Like I believe in myself. I want to go to a place where I can have success. And I felt really good in the process that we could be that place. I think it's a great ballpark for him. We have every day at bats in center field. Both of our hitting coaches were with the Dodgers, and he knew those guys from the minor leagues. So we had some reasons for him to be comfortable here. He's been working unbelievably hard. He's gone to our complex in Arizona every day since we signed him, working on his strength, working on his swing with our coaches, and he's incredibly dedicated. So my hope is that he gets back to an excellent level. It's not going to be through lack of trying, that's for sure. And feel really good about where this is going into spring training. With Dansby, all along we felt like it was a great fit for us, both in terms of him as a player. But also in terms of who he is as a person. I mean, he really, the guy wants to win. He won a national championship at Vanderbilt. He won, a title as a shortstop in Atlanta. And everything he asked us about in the process was about winning. Like, if I sign up with you guys, what are you guys going to do to win? And I do believe like having a an excellent defensive shortstop, who's going to, I think he's going to play that position for a long, long time. Being a leader of that group, and being a guy that, I have no doubt when he goes to bed at night, he does not feel like he's had his best season in the big leagues, and I think that's really important. I think his trend lines are going in the right direction, and we couldn't have been more excited that it worked out that he chose us.
Well, I'm going to follow up. This is going to be positive, Jed. It's amazing. I'm going to follow up on that, because by signing Swanson, you moved Nico Hoerner over to second base, and you're doing this in a year where there are significant rule changes coming. And I wonder how much that was baked into your decision. If there's not going to be a shift, extreme shifts, and even Bellinger, right, in center field is a high-level center fielder. How much was that baked in, that there's new rules coming and we'd be stupid to ignore them? And now you have rangy players at both places.
Yeah, that's where the game is going, right? The game is going to a place of athleticism. It might take a little bit of time to get there, but it was something that was very important to us, that we knew that if we signed one of those shortstops, we knew that Nico would move over to second, and I think he's going to be the favorite to win the Gold Glove, at second. And so our middle infield should be really good defensively, and then obviously Bellinger's really good in center. Happ won a Gold Glove last year in left. Seiya actually struggled a little bit defensively last year compared to what he had done in Japan. Our hope is that being here, knowing the ballparks, having a year under his belt, given his speed and his arm, there's no question he'll get back to the level he played defense in Japan. And I think when you add that up, we should have a really good defensive team. And in my experience, there's some of the best teams I've been around, and some of the teams that surprised the most were teams that were really built on having really good run prevention. And so much of what we think about as pitching is oftentimes really good defense. And on the flip side, when you have really bad defense, you can bastardize a good pitching staff really quickly. So we should really catch the ball this year. I think we'll be very reliable on defense, and my hope is certainly that ticks up our pitching staff, and it'll give confidence to those young pitchers that they know that double plays are going to get turned. They know the balls in the gap are going to get caught, and I do think that makes a huge difference over the course of the season.
You mentioned how you like Swanson, the fact that he won championships at Vanderbilt, the Braves. Bellinger also won a World Series, and another player who won a World Series and was considered a star player when he became a free agent the first time was Eric Hosmer. So I'm wondering what your first base situation is, how you look at that. You have a prospect, Mervis, who people like. Mancini, obviously has played some first, and you got Hosmer in on a minimum deal. Is Hosmer the starter going in, or is that a mix and match situation? And what are your expectations for Eric?
My expectations is that he's certainly going to play first base against right-hand pitching and be given that shot. We had talked to San Diego about him a number of times over the last couple of years, and I knew that this was a place that I think he was excited to play. He loves the idea of playing in Wrigley, and I'm excited to he was in a tough situation in San Diego the last couple of years, constantly getting being rumored in deals and things like that. So I'm excited to get Eric here, make him comfortable. I think that he's going to play really well for us, and sort of be given a new life that's not under the pressure of that contract in San Diego. We signed Mancini he can DH, he can play first, he can play a little corner outfield, but we really needed more power. We have a team that does some good things offensively, but we lacked sort of like the punching power last year. We struggled to score runs in bunches, and we struggled to hit homers, and adding Mancini was really exciting for us. And then obviously Mervis had a great year in the minors, and you can't have enough depth. I think that if there's one thing you learn year after year is that whatever lineup you write out in paper, going into spring training, like it's probably the last time you'll write that lineup out, right? Like the whole course of the year is always an exercise in what is your depth, what does your roster look like, and having a lot of guys to fill different holes, I think is really important, because again, like you're gonna have injuries and poor performance. That's a given. It's how you respond to those things.
Yeah, you mentioned your farm system, and you mentioned breaking down that previous team. if I get a little parochial here, though it will lead to the larger issue of the Cubs, two of the big trades you made to do this were with the Mets and Yankees at the trade deadline a couple of years ago. You traded Javier Baez to get Pete Crow Armstrong, and you traded Anthony Rizzo to get Kevin Alcantara. I wonder if you could give us an update. Those guys are showing up on pretty much, this is the time of year where everyone does their top 100 lists, Baseball America, Baseball Prospectus, etc. And those players are on it. What is their trajectory?
Yeah, I mean, we're excited about both guys. They're both, very athletic outfielders, which is, again, I think you talk about, run prevention. Both those guys have a chance to be really good defenders. Pete had a great year last year. He hadn't played, we only played, like, I think 6 games in 2021 because of the injury, which is probably the reason we were able to acquire him, that he had missed the whole year. We took that chance, and he played great last year at two different levels. And, I'm excited about his defense in center field. I feel like when you look around baseball, it probably is the hardest position to fill, like a guy that can really play defense in center field. It's hard because it's so rare to be able to fill the center field hole in free agency. The center field defense peaks at such a young age, and by the time guys get to free agency, sometimes you can sign a center fielder, but usually it's signing a center fielder to move to a corner in a year or two, right? So it's such a hard position to fill. You almost have to do it through your system, and it hasn't been a position of strength for us. Candidly, we've struggled to find someone that can really do it. So, excited about Bellinger this year, and then hopefully, with Pete, we can find someone that can really play center. And then, I mean, Kevin Alcantara can certainly play center field, no question. He's super athletic. He's 6'6", but I feel like he plays with his levers don't look quite that long when he plays. He's very athletic and just a wonderful kid. And I'm excited to sort of have him in the system for the second year. He had a really good year last year for us in Myrtle Beach, was a tough place to hit. So getting him out of that environment and getting him into some better hitting environments, I'm excited to see what he can do. But, I've been on both sides of those trades. Like when you're winning and when you're trying to push to win the World Series, you end up trading prospects away. And when you're in our situation before, which is we're trading those guys away, you're trading for prospects. And, listen, both the Mets and the Yankees were aggressive to fill their holes. And, I've done back-to-back deadline deals with cash because they're winning and because they have this window where they have Aaron Judge and they had, they got Rizzo and they've got Garrett Cole. And so, I always think about it as a fan of those teams. Yes, you're giving up prospects, but you're doing it for the right reason, which is, listen, you're trying to win championships. And that's why we show up to work every day.
The Cubs is a special organization and team, and you mentioned how you would have liked to have kept one of the stars from the championship team of 2016, which was quite a special championship, as Joel mentioned before. I know you tried and made offers at some point for all of them, Bryant, Baez, and Rizzo. Rizzo's the only one who's been outspoken and, somehow had a bad taste in his mouth. It seemed like you made a reasonable offer for him to me, but I'm wondering, looking back on it, is there anything else you would have done differently? Now, Bryant was injured last year. Baez had a poor season. Doesn't look like it's really come back to bite you, other than the fact that Rizzo has continued to play well. What are your thoughts looking back on that? Is there anything you could have done to keep one or more of these guys?
Yeah, it's interesting you said that, because we were having that conversation in the office yesterday, thinking back on, we approached, I think, almost every guy after the 2016 season, and I think in some ways we could have not, you can't predict, hey, we're going to win the World Series this year, and therefore it's going to be almost impossible to sign those guys. But I think looking back, it's a really hard time to try to sign guys to an extension, right? We just won this iconic championship, and we're offering these guys, extensions that we thought were very much, in line with the market or better, but they were not in the mind space at that point. I mean, they were, they're falling out of bed and making money on card shows and autograph signings and things like that. And they were rock stars in this city at that moment. And so when I look back on us not signing those guys, I would have loved it if we could have kept one or two of those guys. Honestly, that would have been great. We didn't. I do think that the championship probably had something to do with that in that moment, it was really difficult. like with and I think there were some different circumstances, like with Bryant, there was a grievance that was sort of hanging over that made some things harder. With Javi, frankly, we were pretty deep in negotiations on an extension right before COVID hit, and then once COVID hit, we had to table those discussions. And like, I'll always wonder if that deal would have gotten done had COVID not hit a week later. And then obviously with Rizzo, my one thing I learned, one lesson I've talked about this in the public is we negotiated during spring training, and I don't I don't think I like to do that much anymore. I'm going to try to avoid that. I just think that it started off the season on a bad front. I've always driven to and from Arizona with my dogs, and I remember driving back from spring training in 2021, and like opening day was like, the next day I'm driving back, and the only discussion was of Rizzo's extension. Rizzo did a press conference. He felt he was upset that we hadn't gotten a deal done. I was like, this is a horrible way to lead into the season. And I look at it as, I take responsibility for that. Like, I should have put a deadline much earlier, and given some space before the season. And so, whether it affected performance or not, I don't know. That team was actually in first place close to July 1st before we really collapsed, but it left a bad taste in, I think, everyone's mouth. And it's something I'm going to try to avoid going forward, is that try to avoid those things that drag really deep into spring training, because it isn't a great way to prepare for a season talking about a negotiation. And that's on the team to avoid that situation, I think.
What's funny, Jed, is we wondered when the Aaron Judge thing fell apart just before the season last year, was he going to have a bad season because of it? I guess it does. One size doesn't fit all with that one. So it's amazing.
100%.
Yeah.
We've all seen it too. Like, you have guys in contract years that have their best year. They're just laser focused. They enjoy the challenge of it. It isn't a distraction to them. It's a motivator. And then we've all seen other guys that just the weight of it really hurts them. And I don't know I'm not smart enough to know which guys it's going to affect, right? But it feels like things go one way or the other sometimes. And obviously, I give Judge so much credit. To go out there after turning down was $217 million or whatever he turned down, and to go out and have that kind of year, that was incredibly fun to watch, and really was the most remarkable walk year that we've ever seen. And I guess it shows he can play in the pressure of New York, being able to do something like that, which is is pretty unbelievable, and good for him for being able to to want to prove that.
Yeah, Jed, if I was just wrapping up here, and thank you so much for joining us, of course, I would go full circle, because I thought you said something at the beginning about how hard it is to win a championship. I would say that no team has been better run for the last decade than the Dodgers, and they've won one championship in a 60-game season, right? Like, they're hard to win. And you talked broadly about the lessons. I wonder if we could kind of wrap up here by specific. You're trying to get your team back and then keep it there longer. What is there one overriding thing that you learned from it not repeating that you are now applying to try to make the Cubs champions again, and then consistent after being a champion?
Yeah. So I think a couple lessons. I think, one of the things I learned, and I'll say this broadly without being too specific, is I think you have to adapt when you're on top. I think you have to make changes when you're on top. I think that if you, there's a human nature tendency, when you sort of get to the top of the mountain, you kind of look around, enjoy the view, feel good about the hike you just went on. And I think what I learned in a lot of different ways is that's the moment you have to get back to work. You have to make changes. I think that team chemistry is the fleetingest of things, right? That one team that has this special bond, like you're going to leave for the winter, you're going to come back in spring training, it's all different. And I've talked to so many people at it. Rossi has talked to me about like the 2013 Red Sox versus the 2014 Red Sox. I've watched it, 04, 05, 16 to 17. Like, you can't bottle up that moment. The moment's gone, right? And so I think when you are on top, you have to make changes in how you develop players. You have to make changes in your everyday lineup. You have to mix and match things according. Not, you can't bottle it up in this like sustain it that way, right? In some ways, the way to sustain it is actually by continuing to make changes and continuing to move forward. And that's probably the thing I learned the most, is that I thought, there's some things in our game that changed dramatically around 2016. And I think at that moment we had this amazing farm system, this great group of young players. We were winning, and I didn't think we adapted fast enough. I don't think we made enough changes to our core group of players in that moment. And I think that's probably my biggest takeaway, is that the way to sustain things, I think, is by continuing to make changes. And I think if you try to keep things the same, or you're stubborn to what you did before, I think you're going to lose out.
Yeah, well, John and I never change, and that's why we're changing the name of the podcast to Good Cop, Bad Cop. Thank you so much for joining us on Good Cop, Bad Cop. Have a healthy spring training and a great season, Jed.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
We thank Jed Hoyer so much. He was really terrific with us. We do get lucky, John. We get a lot of good guests, and now we wrap up the show with what we've wrapped up the show with the past few weeks. Regular segment, I guess now. Hit or error from the previous week, John. What's your hit or error?
Well, we're going to continue on our good guy, bad guy theme, because I'm going to anticipate an error from you, and I'm going to try to be positive and go with a hit here. I'm going to give the Texas Rangers credit. I like some of their minor league deals. I normally don't talk. We don't normally talk about minor league deals on here, but might as well give a shot. Travis Jankowski looked good for the Mets at the beginning of last year. Ian Kennedy has had a good career. So has Danny Duffy, and so I give them credit. I love their winter. Bigger picture. Bringing in DeGrom, bringing in Heaney, bringing back Martin Perez, Odorizzi, bringing Evaldi. I mean, they've got a whole rotation that they acquired in the winter. So Chris Young, who was a pitcher, now in charge of baseball operations for the Texas Rangers, I'm going to give him my gold. Oh, we don't call it gold star. He's going to get my hit this week. And now that's 2 out of 3 hits for me. So we'll see about this good guy, bad guy routine, but I'm predicting an error from you.
Yeah, you're digging deep to act like you're actually a good guy if you're doing Travis Jankowski.
I said it's a routine. It's a good guy routine. I didn't say it was a good guy.
Yeah. I get it, John. I'm going to shock you. I'm going to break my streak, and I'm going to go with a hit as well.
Oh, nice.
On a Saturday night in New York was the 98th Baseball Writers of Association's annual dinner. It hadn't been held for several years because of COVID. We were back. Good for baseball. All 8 major award winners, MVP, Cy Young, Rookie of the Year, Manager, including Aaron Judge, Justin Verlander, who was the AL MVP. They were there. Buck Showalter was on the dais. We gave out the major awards, but I want to make it personal. This was a great night for the New York Post, right? We honored the great late photographer, Anthony Causey, who unfortunately died of COVID during the terrible days early on, like right there. I was Easter Sunday in 2020. Everyone who worked with Anthony loved him so much. He was almost always in Met camp for spring training. We honored George King, who was our beat writer for about 20 years. He retired during COVID. We never got a chance to give him his long and meritorious award. And then I actually presented to our colleague, Mike Vaccaro, the You Gotta Have Heart Award that he shared with Howie Rose, who's coming back from bladder cancer. For those of you who don't know, Mike had a long health issue. And on August 9th, because of eventually something called Charcot's ankle, where, essentially the ligaments fall away and your ankle just flopped, Mike had to have everything from his left shin down amputated. And Mike has made an incredible recovery because literally from day one, I think I talked to him the next day, August 10th on the phone, John. I was crying and he was encouraging me about it. And he just said, I'm going to tackle this with enthusiasm. I want to golf again. I want to, with his wife, Lee, I want to go travel again. And most important, I want to get back to the press box. And Mike has made it now back to the press box a few times. And for those of us who love him so much and love sitting next to him, and it's one of my favorite things to do at a ballpark is sit and talk baseball and movies and basketball and all the things that we love together. It was great because that night when I gave the award to Mike, he walked to the podium to accept this award.
Very nice. Yeah, Mike Vaccaro making that comeback is unbelievable. The guy is the greatest worker, great columnist, sports writer of the year in New York, and I'm looking forward to sharing the press box with him. I've only been at the Post for a year, so I have not been able to do it yet, and it will be a treat. I will consider that hit for Mike Vaccaro and of the great people, not for you, because it doesn't count as a hit if you're giving yourself the hit, right? I mean, I understand you were a big organizer of the dinner, but we'll say that was a hit for Mike Vaccaro.
It's a hit. I said something positive, John. You can't even give me that. I gave something.
But it can't be about yourself, can it? I mean,
it wasn't about me. It was about the dinner. I just happened to be there. Just because you were lazy and stayed in Miami and didn't come up for it doesn't mean that I'm glorifying.
Now we're getting closer to error. Now we're getting closer.
Well, we're getting closer to our history. That's what I was saying. You'll share a lot of that history if you stick with us on the show, which is a podcast from the New York Post. Thanks to Andrew Hartz, who always helps us navigate through our personality quirks as a producer of this show. Don't forget, Yes app. This podcast drops every Wednesday by noon. Subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get podcasts. Give us a 5-star rating. And don't forget to join us. We're getting close to spring training. We'll take you on the journey if you stick with this podcast, The Show, with Joel Sherman and John Heyman.